It was a foregone conclusion that Tampa Bay would pick up Tristan Wirfs' fifth-year option this offseason, but is it really a good thing? We examine the up and the downsides of fifth-year options and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to today's episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so please be sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. You always get the latest episodes when they drop. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media and staff writer for BucsGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. Find me there, here, or on Twitter at dharrison82, and find the show at Locked On Bucs. And now you can find Locked On Bucs and the entire Locked On network on the SiriusXM app. Thanks again for making Locked On Bucs your first view or your first listen today and every day. And a special thank you out there to our everydayers. Make sure you come through tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time live. We will be dropping a Locked On Bucs live episode reacting to the New Year's NFL schedule, talking about all the big hits for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Speaking of big hits for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tristan Wirfs has certainly been a big hit for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers since he was drafted in the 2020 NFL draft. Because he was drafted in 2020, that meant this offseason, the offseason between his third and fourth NFL years, was the year that the team had to make the decision on whether or not they were going to pick up his fifth-year option. Of course, we all expected them to pick it up. They did pick it up. Everybody rejoiced and celebrated. But is there a downside? General Manager Jason Licht was recently on SiriusXM NFL Radio, and during that interview, he was asked about the perception of fifth-year options, with the interviewer stating that he thought it was a good thing when players got their options exercised. It was a compliment, right? It meant we like you. But he also knows that there are some players who view it as a bad thing because they'd almost rather hit free agency a year earlier than they can if their fifth-year option is picked up. So asked about how they got Wirfs on board with having his fifth-year option picked up and exercised, Jason Licht said, quote, "With Tristan and his agent, they've known that this is something that we're going to do, but they also know that Tristan is definitely in our long-term plans, and he's the type of player that you don't want to see leave, walk out of the building," end quote. So very strong words from Jason Licht on Tristan Wirfs. And Tristan Wirfs, I mean, he has fifth-year option picked up, and as far as I'm aware, has not held out, does not plan on holding out. Not that he could hold out right now anyway, because nothing mandatory is happening until June. So if you're holding out, you can't be a holdout until June. So nobody's holding out in the month of May. That's not possible. Nothing is mandatory right now. Just putting that out there. But here's where I think maybe some of the semantics get twisted up a little bit in this conversation, right? I don't think any NFL player gets upset when their fifth-year option gets exercised. I think some of them get upset when they actually have to face playing on it. There's a totally big difference there. And why? Remember, this is between the third and fourth years of an NFL player's contract, a first-round draft picks contract. Just in case somebody there doesn't know, only first-round picks have fifth-year options available. Every other rookie has a standard 4-year deal. Every other the first-round picks, they have their 4-year deal, but then the NFL organizations have the option of exercising a fifth-year option. There's a tiered pay scale there. They get paid X amount for whatever tier they qualify on. There's a basic level. There's a playing time level, which is a certain amount of snaps per year and all these other things. But then there's also pay scale levels for making a Pro Bowl, making multiple Pro Bowls. Tristan Wirfs maxed out his value by making multiple Pro Bowls. So there's a lot to that, right? So I think between year 3 and 4, like you're focused on year 4 right now. So to have your team say, we want you for an extra year. We don't have to have you past year 4, but we want you past year 4. I mean, that's a compliment, right? That's a good thing. It's got to make anybody feel good. But I think when you have an issue, it comes to playing on the fifth-year option, right? And we talk about Devin White a lot on this show. That's essentially, I think, where Devin White is coming from. Don't want to put words in his mouth. I can't say that is 100% fact. He'll obviously have his opportunity to answer those questions if he chooses to, because he's definitely going to get asked about it. It's basically all about security. The fifth-year option is fully guaranteed against injury, which is relatively new to fifth-year options because it wasn't always guaranteed against injury, but now it is, which means that once a team exercises that option, it's guaranteed no matter what happens. So if Tristan Wirfs gets injured this season, knock on wood that it doesn't happen, knock on wood again that it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, knock on wood again that it doesn't happen, he's still fully guaranteed that money. Like as of right now, that money is fully locked in, guaranteed. The Buccaneers are on the hook for that money. It wasn't always like that. So there's a little bit of security there, but there's more security in a 5-year deal that's got 5 years worth of guaranteed money, right? Now, this guaranteed against injury 5th-year option has started to do two things. One thing it's done is it's given teams more reason to give pause when deciding whether or not to pick up these 5th-year options, because if you have a player who maybe is kind of living up to the expectations, but really isn't living up to the expectations, in a lot of situations you have guys that are doing well, but they're also battling some injuries that's kind of taking them off the field and derailing some of their development. Maybe now, because it is fully guaranteed against health or against injury, maybe you don't pick up that option, because if you do, you might still get that mediocre performance, but you also might be on the hook for a significant amount of cap space for a player that's not even on the field. So you might look at those fringe players, and where 5 years ago, maybe we pick up that option and roll those dice. Now, maybe we let that guy go into his 4th year on an expiring contract. This season, for example, 15 of the 2020 first-round picks had their options denied. In the case of number 3 overall pick, cornerback Jeff Okudah, he was traded to the Atlanta Falcons before the deadline for a 5th-round pick. And because Detroit is paying part of his 2023 salary, his 5th-year option is no longer available. Now, Packers quarterback Jordan Love signed an extension, so his option was also voided because he's already playing more than 5 years there. And that means that barely more than half of the 2020 first-round class has had a positive impact enough on their franchise that their team is willing to say between year 3 and 4, we want you beyond year 4. That's it. Just barely more than half. Obviously, Tristan Wirfs is one of those guys. And honestly, the lack of willingness for NFL teams to give first contract players the full life of the contract is likely starting to roll over a little bit into some of these younger players also not wanting to give teams the benefit of the doubt. Treatment begets similar treatment. If you're not going to give the young player the full life of the contract as a league to prove themselves, the player isn't necessarily going to want to spend the full life of their first contract letting you prove that you're going to take care of them. So really, this hasn't become an issue of players not wanting to have their options picked up, but it's starting to become an issue of players not wanting to play that option year because they don't want to give teams the benefit of the doubt when teams are showing time and time again, like in the case of 15 of the 32 picked players in 2020, that they're not willing to give them the full extent of security that they're able to give them when they don't perform or when they're battling injuries. And that's what I think, again, like that's what we're seeing a little bit from Devin White. Even in Tristan Wirfs' situation, he and his agent, like Jason Licht said, they know the team is going to do this. They know that's the plan, and that's fine. And certainly it is a compliment. And while it sounds unlikely that the Bucs are looking to extend Wirfs before this season, if that's the case, this time next year, faced with having to go into his 5th year without a contract beyond that, playing on an expiring contract, even one that's worth north of $15 million for that year, that may not make Tristan Wirfs all that comfortable when he considers, I helped this team win a Super Bowl. I made a position change to a more critical, more important position for them. And I've been one of the best at my position since I entered the league. So if that option is picked up, that's not the problem. It might be the option being enforced that could be the problem. And next year, Wirfs and his agent may ask Jason Licht to put the Glazers' money where his mouth is. And if Wirfs is a long-term part of the plan, prove it. Pay him. What would it look like? That answer is going to come up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and the calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built Bar. You got to try this. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. They taste so amazing, you're not going to realize that they're good for you. They're all covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. They taste like candy bars, but they have amazing macros with only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but they bring you 17 grams of protein. You can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, while your specialty flavors can be found at built.com. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a 4-bar box of cookies and cream bar, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. Or you can run to Sam's Club and grab a 13-bar box of hit flavors, brownie batter puff, and churro puff. And you can still go to built.com and get yourself in on the action with the return of chocolate peanut butter and chocolate coconut granola bars. That's Built Bar, built.com. Built different. You got to try this. Thanks again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day, everydayers. Again, make sure you come back tomorrow night, Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. for you West Coasters live here on YouTube. We will be doing our NFL schedule release. For those of you who are on audio, don't worry. As soon as the live is over, we will download the audio, upload it. We should get it hopefully before 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Just depends on the system sometimes and how long it takes to update. But back to our conversation about Tristan Wirfs. Even if Tristan Wirfs doesn't get his extension this year, which again, reading between the lines of Jason Licht's words on Sirius XM NFL, doesn't sound like they're going to be extending him this year. So if they wait till next year, what would that extension look like? Well, the easy button, SpotTrack estimates Wirfs' current market value to be $24.7 million per year. So if you do the standard 5-year extension for a player, and we're not going to dive completely deep into this, but when a player signs a contract, they get their signing bonus. The value of that signing bonus gets spread over the life of the contract up to 5 years. So if you sign a guy to a 6-year contract, you can only spread their signing bonus to 5 years. So that's why most of those long contracts are 5 years, because that's all you can extend it to. And then later on, if you need to extend it and add void years, you can do that as well. So if you do a standard 5-year contract, $24.7 million per year for a player that's done as well as Tristan Wirfs has, you're looking at $124 million roughly over those 5 years, rounding up just a little bit on that math because I like Tristan. I want to see him get paid. How do they get to that number? How does SpotTrack get to that number? Well, I don't know their exact calculations, right? They do bring up some example contracts. I looked up some example contracts on my own. Wirfs has, and what you want to do is you want to compare players, right? Tristan Wirfs has graded in the 80s, according to PFF, each of his 3 NFL seasons. And he's also given up no more than 3 sacks in a single year and no more than 45 pressures in his entire 3-year career. But not only that, he's also only committed 11 penalties in 3 seasons total. Ryan Jensen had like 11 in a game, I'm pretty sure, a couple of seasons ago. Not really, but you get the point. So when you look at the top paid offensive tackles in average annual value today, what you'll find for your top 5, Laramie Tunsil for the Houston Texans is making $25 million average annual value. Doesn't mean he's making that this year, or he made it last year, or he's making it next year. It just means when you average out the life of his contract, he's making on average $25 million per year. Trent Williams, San Francisco 49ers, is making $23.01 million per year. David Bakhtiari is getting $23 million from the Packers. Lane Johnson is getting $20.187 million from the Eagles. Jawan Taylor is getting $20 million annual average value from the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, when you stack up those top 5 guys against Tristan Wirfs, you find that Laramie Tunsil has 37 penalties in the last 3 seasons that he played healthy. And I say it that way because 2021, he missed a significant amount of time. So to get an accurate depiction, I went to 2022, 2020, and 2019. Those 3 years, he had 37 penalties. Again, Tristan Wirfs, 11 penalties. Laramie Tunsil also gave up 65 pressures during those 3 seasons. Tristan Wirfs is at 45. So quite the difference there. Trent Williams, 29 penalties over the last 3 years, 61 pressures given up. Still, Tristan Wirfs doing much better. David Bakhtiari, same boat as Laramie Tunsil, missed a significant amount of time in 2021. So these numbers are combined 2022, 2020, 2019. 20 penalties, only 9 more than Tristan. During a 3-year stretch, that's not a whole lot more, but it's still more. 56 pressures given up by David Bakhtiari. So Tristan Wirfs, I'm going to stop there. We're not even going top 5. The top 3 paid tackles in the National Football League this year, Tristan Wirfs statistically, production-wise, quantifiably is outperforming all of them. Now, he's a right tackle. They're all left tackles. That chip for the Buccaneers to try to play in low ball. I'm not saying they would try to low ball Tristan, but I'm just saying that chip that they could potentially have in their back pocket is about to go away because he's about to be the left tackle. That's all but been confirmed by the team in their comments. We'll get into some of those here in just a little bit. So really, Wirfs has already holistically outperformed the top 3 paid left tackles in the National Football League. And this year, when Wirfs becomes a left tackle and he has similar production, hopefully that's what's going to happen. You're going to have to tack on that consideration, and that's going to take a bargaining chip off of the Buccaneers table. And when you average those annual values, you come in just under SpotTrack's projection. So it's actually pretty accurate no matter how you get there, right? But when you tack on the inflation rate and assuming he gets through this first year as a left tackle healthy, again, knock on wood that it doesn't happen, or that it does happen, that he doesn't get injured, knock on wood again. 2 of the top 3 average earners haven't stayed healthy in the last 3 years. So that's going to be another thing. When you're talking about paying this guy, look, he's more reliable, more available, right? Best ability is availability. More available than this guy, more available than that guy. And the numbers stack up. The quantifiable data is better than these guys. And he's younger. I mean, when you think about it, that $24.7 million, that's the floor. All right. That is the floor right now for Tristan Wirfs. So if that's the case, then it actually makes better business sense for the Buccaneers and for general manager Jason Licht to keep Wirfs on his fifth-year option, because next year that option pays him about $7 million less than he deserves, than that floor. They're going to save about $7 million just by not extending him in 2024 and making him play on that fifth-year option. And then you can start the new contract in 2025. And if you manipulate it correctly, you'll do it to where the cap hit in 2025 isn't that big. Again, Tristan's not going to be too concerned with the cap hit. He's more concerned about the bonuses and the guaranteed money, which you're going to give him. So that's where these problems tend to come in if they do. And I think that's where we're seeing the issue with Devin White is he believes he could, if on the open market, probably get more money than his fifth-year option is going to pay him. And basically the Buccaneers are getting him at a discount. And the question is, okay, well, if I ball out for you, are you going to give me back that discount in my new contract? I don't know if they're going to do that. And that's where I think some of these problems tend to come in. So again, Wirfs and his agent might be happy now, but they may not be so happy if Wirfs continues his production and he does it at left tackle. When you look at you're basically losing $7 million by playing on this fifth-year option. That could be where things change tone a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, just because maybe you're not happy with that situation, like, oh man, like if I was a free agent, I would get paid $24 million a year instead of the 17, 18 million a year. I mean, on the fifth-year option doesn't mean Tristan's going to hold out or post dramatic social media things. You know what I mean? Like everybody handles this stuff a little bit different. So I'm not saying like the Tristan Wirfs train is about to catch fire or anything like that. Just saying that this quote unquote happiness with the situation may not be long lived depending on the situation. That's just part of the business side that a lot of times we don't like to see and we don't want to talk about, but really it needs to be understood because that's part of what these guys are going through. And again, if Wirfs gets injured, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. That's where we see things get real touchy because players can't take back their health, right? Like Tristan Wirfs can say, no, I'm undoing that health issue. But general manager can go back on their word, and they do all the time. Like Jason Licht's intentions on Tristan Wirfs being a long-term part of the future could change in an instant if the worst case scenario comes. So that fifth-year option isn't a problem until it really is a problem. But the trade-off between the owners and the players is that the franchises get an extra year of control over the young players, and the players get a big payday in exchange for that control, right? Like $18 million is not a small chunk of change for anybody, but it does come with a price. So whether or not the trade-off is worth it, honestly, is just a question you got to ask each player. Right now, obviously, Devin White doesn't feel like the trade-off is worth it. Apparently, he's maybe coming around on seeing the upside to it, right? But every player's got to answer that for themselves. I'm not going to tell them how to believe in it. I'm not going to tell them what to think. I wouldn't tell you what to think either. Of course, for Locked On Bucs, Bucs Game Day, Bucs Nation, and Bucs Nation, Bucs Nation, we all hope none of this is an issue. Tristan Wirfs stays healthy, happy, and very well paid for a very long time in Tampa Bay. Speaking of the offensive line, though, Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales apparently hates Locked On Bucs and decided to blow up our depth chart only 24 hours after we released it. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales went to the podium. He wasn't the only one who went to the podium, but he was the main one that went to the podium on Wednesday and basically just completely threw our entire offensive line. Well, not our entire offensive line. I'm being a little bit dramatic, but here's basically what he said. Dave Canales asked about the offensive line, said, quote, "I'm excited about it. Adding Matt Filer, when you see Tristan and Matt lined up on the left side, and when Jensen was there, those three guys next to each other is pretty impressive. And then the depth of guys who've had to play, you've got Hainsey who's had to play, you've got Nick Leverett who's played as a starter for us. We have so much depth and experience. Luke getting a shot to get back at right tackle. It's early to make any decisions on what all is going to happen, but I feel really encouraged with the guys we have. And then, of course, I didn't even mention Cody Mauch and the explosiveness and athleticism he has when he gets in there too. I'm excited about the group and knowing what we want to do offensively. I think we're going to have a really great shot at doing that." End quote. Of course, this comes on the heel of James and I doing our film study on Cody Mauch. and putting out our offensive line depth chart, which had Tristan Wirfs starting at left tackle, Ryan Jensen starting at center, Robert Hainsey starting at right guard, Luke Gedeke starting at right tackle, and Cody Mauch starting at left guard. But Dave Canales' comments would make you think Matt Filer is the lead horse for the left guard position. So the thought process that we had, that James and I had in our depth chart, and look, we're not afraid to be wrong. That's part of the job when you analyze something or assess something. Sometimes you're going to miss the mark, right? We thought, put the rookie between Ryan Jensen and Tristan Wirfs. Ryan Jensen, the veteran center, obvious leader. Tristan Wirfs, the left tackle, all pro caliber. Put Cody Mauch in between them as a rookie. Let them kind of elevate his play as well and kind of stabilize him during his rookie year. Apparently, Dave Canales has different ideas, and that's fine. He gets paid a lot more money to think about offensive schemes than I do. So we'll leave those decisions up to him if that's okay with me, which it is. But look, things are also far from etched in stone right now. Outside of, I think, Tristan Wirfs, I think Tristan going to left side, right, is pretty much done. Ryan Jensen obviously is the center. And Canales even said himself, he doesn't plan on having a hard timeline for when he wants that starting five set. So there's still a chance that our original five is the starting five, but it's not as important to be right as it is for the Buccaneers to have the best starting unit that they want or that they can get. Dave Canales did mention that most teams actually have like a 6-man rotational kind of chart that like, hey, if this thing happens or we got to flip this guy or we got to flip that guy, here's what we do. But given Canales's comments on Wednesday, I think that we, if we had to edit the depth chart, Tristan Wirfs obviously still the left tackle, Ryan Jensen the center, Luke Gedeke, I think right now still probably has the lead on the right tackle job unless, he loses it during camp. Matt Filer at left guard. And I think now the competition really is right guard, Robert Hainsey or Cody Mauch. And I do think that Mauch could also play himself into the right tackle spot. I mean, again, Luke Gedeke, he's going to get the opportunity, but that doesn't mean he's just going to be the starter, right? Offensive line coach Joe Gilbert praised Cody Mauch's Senior Bowl performance in his own comments on Wednesday and specifically mentioned how he played all 5 positions on the offensive line and did it well when he was down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So really, I think you have a couple of solidified guys. Ryan Jensen, Tristan Wirfs, really, I think, are your only like surefire guys. Everybody else, I think, is still up in the air just a little bit. Matt Filer, I think it was Coach Gilbert also mentioned how Matt is familiar with this type of system because they ran a similar one in Los Angeles while he was there. So I think Cody Mauch is really the wild card. Does he do enough to prevent the coaches from taking him off the field? Because that's an analogy we kind of hear all the time is don't show coaches why you should be on the field. Show coaches why we can't take you off the field. That's how you earn a starting job in the NFL. Will Cody Mauch be able to do that starting this weekend at rookie camp? Then you got OTAs, you got training camp. Will he be able to do that? If so, where is that position going to be? Is it going to be left guard, right tackle? I think right now we can say it won't be left tackle and it won't be center, barring injury. Not a knocking on wood on today's episode. Let's not have that happen. But bottom line, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch it develop. And I think the more we talk about this offensive line, the more the coaches talk about this offensive line, the more we realize that there is actually a good amount of depth there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up front. Evan Klosky of WTSP mentioned on yesterday's episode, James, that the Buccaneers do have a deficiency of depth at certain positions, and I certainly agree with him, wildly agree with him, in fact, especially the running back position, wide receiver even. You lose Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. I mean, it's a rough situation going on there. Tight end as well. You go down the list. But I think offensive line-wise, it may not be the greatest, don't get me wrong, but I think there is some depth there. So if you need to, you can tap into some of that as well. It's going to be fun to watch it all develop. It's going to be fun to see if Luke Gedeke can take that second-year step that a lot of guys take in the National Football League. And just one of several camp battles that we're going to be watching coming up here on the horizon during training camp. And we will be here to analyze all of it, talk about all of it, give our opinions on it. Some of them will be wrong, some of them will be right, and we will appreciate all of you for coming up and being a part of it with us here, and thanking you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day. Every day there's one last time live schedule release reaction episode coming Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time here on the Locked On Bucs YouTube page. So make sure you subscribe, turn on the alerts, or just set an alarm on your watch or your phone so that you know that it's coming. Drop your questions, drop your comments in the YouTube comments or on the live chat during the premiere. Hit us up via email at lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com or in the Twitter DMs at LockedOnBucs. Once again, I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media, staff writer for BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, fire the cannons, and I thank you for joining me right here for another episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.